Hey, my name's Robbie Ryder from Crossroads Music, and I'm sitting here with some of my friends, and we're having a conversation about Black History Month. How about y'all introduce yourselves?
Sweet. I'm Daniel. Daniel Chumasara.
And what do you do? What would you say you do around here?
I'm one of the junior worship leaders, so I get to lead worship at different sites. It's a blast.
My name is Sade, and I have the opportunity to sing with Crossroads Music and lead worship around here sometimes too.
And my name is Eric Cash, and I am the music director and co-worship leader around here. That's pretty fun.
It's real good. That's a new assignment. It's good.
Super fresh.
Super fresh.
Super fresh.
Okay, so we're just gonna run through some questions. The first one's just an easy one. Black History Month. For it? Not for it? What do you think about that?
So I would say that I am for it. I think that growing up and learning history in school, you had your set people that you learned about. You had your Martin Luther Kings, you had your, you had the people that you knew. And
Harriet Tubman.
Yeah, Harriet
Rosa
Tubman,
Parks.
yes.
Yeah.
So I think there was that, but it was a very limited and skewed view of Black history as a whole. I think you had bits and pieces of slavery, and that was kind of the story. And so I feel like Black history is almost like a booster shot of remembrance for the history of the accomplishments of Black people throughout history. It's a good reminder. It puts it in people's forefront, in people's faces to say, hey, wait a minute, I may need to know more about the history of these people, which is American history.
Yeah, right.
Right, but it's
Say more about that.
Yes, it is American history, and I feel like it should be more ingrained into what we learn. But Black history is American history, and so I am for it. I am also for. I think we've talked about. We'll talk more about this, but it should also be more ingrained in what we know, and learn in school, and yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love that line. Like, Black history is American history.
It's American history.
That's strong.
Yes.
How about you guys?
I would say both. So I'm for it staying, and it's a need currently because there are more attempts to not address the full scope of history, especially as it pertains to Black history.
Yeah.
And I think we need more of it over the course of the year. I'm now at least 10 years removed from high school and 5 years removed from like college, and I'm learning now. I'm learning more now about history, about Black history in particular, because I'm having to do more research into things that I wasn't told in school or taught,
right.
Unless I had taken up an elective in college that focused strictly on that. And I feel like that's something that's such an important thing for Black people to learn at a young age, because it helps you own who you are. You learn more about the valuable contributions that Black people have made throughout history, that encourage you to like see yourself in a more full and richer way than just the singular modes that history's been taught in.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's so good, man. What it makes me think about is like, I felt like in high school or just in school in general, like Black History Month was just a month that you learn again about the key players, right, in Black history, and then that was it. It was just kind of like a passing moment, and it wasn't until I became an adult that there were other aspects of Black history that I didn't even know about or know the reasoning behind them, like Juneteenth. Like I had no idea about that, and did my own research on it and realized how much that influences like the way that we party and the way that we gather and the way that we dress and all these things, and brought some clarity just to who I am as a person and why I like some of the things that I like. It's like, oh, this is a piece of life.
Will you give us an example? Like what's something specific about that sort of clicked for you?
Yeah. So the initial thing that I found out was that out of Juneteenth, we started to gather as a people to celebrate on this one day. And in that celebration, we would dress to the nines, because as slaves, you weren't allowed to dress like that.
Yeah.
At all. You had to look like a slave. It was actually law.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I guess in thought to kind of escape that mindset, we started dressing up real nice and having a good time and partying and all that. And it's like, wow, okay, I'm not just ratchet and want to listen to and want to go to parties all the time. Like, no, like this has some meaning to it, you know? And it just made me think about all the churches that I, have been a part of growing up, and dressing up in suits and stuff, all like that. It didn't start with like it being a fashion show. It started with, no, we actually have permission to do this now.
Here's an expression of freedom.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
So good.
All right, so y'all are musicians, and y'all have been a part of the church for a long time. And so talk about being black in the church. And I know that's just in some of our previous conversations, I know there's some baggage around that. There's that's not been an easy walk. So could you just talk just a little bit about what's been your process, your journey, and where you are now? That's a loaded question, I know.
Yeah, that's super loaded. And there's so many things I think about, like in my makeup as a leader. I started out in good old Baptist church, where every kid sang in the youth choir, whether you could sing or not.
Yeah.
Whether you could sing or not.
You singing in the youth choir, because that was the thing to do. And whereas like some of my siblings and other family members weren't really into that, and you can tell once they got older, they kind of ventured out from it. But I kept with it because it was my thing. And it was through that kind of forceful, hey, all of the kids growing up in church are going to sing in the choir, is what helped me find my voice. And so that just became a staple in my life. And as I got older, it just started to change a little bit. Whereas that was my place of refuge, I started to realize that I didn't sound like all the people at my church. And I didn't, express myself the way that maybe some of the other musicians did. And so...
What do you mean you didn't sound like other musicians at your church?
Like I didn't growl when I would sing, I didn't have that, That just wasn't me. Yeah. I was just a smooth, clean tone kind of person, and couldn't really hit that stuff. And it started to create a divide between me and some of my other peers. And, really it started making me feel like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough at this thing,
Wow.
Man,
So,
that's a struggle that I relate to, of like, I, coming from Zimbabwe, I've been here I've lived more than half of my life in America, but just a little over half. And because my dad's a missionary, we kind of went between black churches and white churches, right? And so my dad raised us in a way that like no music was off limits. He would have Bob Marley, Eric Clapton, Bill Gaither, Kirk Franklin, Hillsong United, Darling Check. Wow. So it was very much a like super eclectic
That's
thing.
a heck of a playlist.
Yeah.
It is.
And what was kind of a shell shock to me was kind of when we came over here, it was like, no, like you're not going to hear Kirk Franklin typically at like white churches, and vice versa. You're not going to hear Hillsong United a lot of the time at like black churches. And it was that thing of like, man, like those are both expressions of worship that I've been raised in, that my dad's made a very conscious effort of like, nah, you're not going to be limited in how you worship God. Like you're raising up and you're lifting up your voice to God. And so kind of that tension of like, man, how do I navigate and how do I best serve God's people and also worship God? But a lot of times I felt like a chameleon almost, and trying to learn the art of like, okay, cool, like discussions that you and I have had where it's like, nah, you're more of an ambassador. And that in itself is a different like mind shift of like, oh yeah, like that's not just being like, you're for all people. And so kind of just, that's been part of my history. And
Yeah.
so that struggle of like, man, like, cool, I want us to keep doing Kirk Franklin. I want us to keep doing Fred Hammond. I also want us to like dabble in some of the like Hillsong United stuff, because that was like the stuff that I had started to like kind of take in more of at that time, especially as a guitar player. Like, you don't see many representations especially the black guitar player and vocalist. Like, you don't see many examples of that.
Yeah,
That's
thanks.
so good. But yes, I resonate with both what Eric and Daniel said. And I grew up, my dad was in the military. We were hopping around to different parts of the country and the world. Actually, I lived in Zimbabwe for a short time when I was younger, which always blows my mind. But for me, the connection to church was a lot through recorded music, because we weren't always in a physical building. So people like the Fred Hammonds and Commissioned, which is where Fred Hammond started with, and to the Mississippi Mass Choir. And we had, most of my music upbringing was gospel music. And so that was the sound that really resonated with me. And
Yeah.
I think that as I grew older and kind of made my own footprint in church and in community, that I wanted to bring my sound to wherever I was. And I think that there is this idea that you have to be like what everyone else around you is, but bringing who God made each of us to be is also it's so important
Yeah.
to be inclusive and not just seen and mimicking everything around you all the time.
Yeah.
And being who you are, I think, in Christ and the sound that he gave you and who he made you to be.
That's strong, Sade. Thanks. All right, so when you're younger and you're sort of cutting your teeth on music, cutting your teeth on figuring out what's God put in you, what does God want out of you, you kind of find people you look at and you admire something about them. There's something about them that resonates or that calls you out. I'd love to know, I think we'd love to know, who are those people that when you were younger you looked at and admired? And yeah, I'd love to hear that.
So one of those people and groups for me was Commissioned, which is where Fred Hammond, if you guys are familiar with Fred Hammond, where he kind of got his start with. And what I loved about Commissioned is they were almost the next generation of like full gospel music, and they spoke and sang about things that were current. And it was through the lens of Christ, but they weren't ignoring the things that were going on in the world. They had a sound that was current. The harmonies were on point. So for me, it gave me a love for harmonies and finding different melodies that were different than what I'd heard, elsewhere. And that's kind of what I grew up on. Like, that was the sound that appealed to me most. And it's funny, I got to see them in concert a few years ago, and I knew every single word. Like, when I tell you, I was in the aisles, like dancing and like
Yes.
lyrics. They were looking at me like, this lady must really. But like, this is who I grew up on,
Yeah.
and this is the sound that I got to see and hear the word of God through too. Like, yeah, they spoke about current issues, but also like there was word, and it spoke life to me, and it really helped me in my walk with Christ. And yeah, that was
That's great.
great. Yeah.
Good old Commissioner. You took it back with that. And some of my influencers, I'll give you a local one. His name is David Miner, and he led the choir at my church, and he would play the organ and teach the songs to the choir, and then he would lead the songs, and then he would lead the songs from the organ, and then he would stand up and direct.
Oh, man.
And he was just so good and full of life. I'm like, man, I want to be like him. So like, he was one of my super early influencers. To think about some other names, when Kirk Franklin came out.
Hold on a second, because that's kind of you now. Like, you can
That's
lead
true.
from the
That's
organ,
true.
then you can get up and you can direct the band, and then you can go up in front and lead, and then you can sit at a piano and lead.
Yeah.
I mean, that's you should call him.
Yeah.
And tell him.
I'm gonna call him.
You should call him.
I am. I'm gonna do that.
All right.
Yeah, he definitely left a huge imprint, for sure. I think about Kirk Franklin when he put out Stomp. Like, that was revolutionary and fun for me. growing up because we would sing that all the time in youth choir. Ty Tribbett, oh my goodness, he just revolutionized. His music sounded like everything in my head put together. I'm like, this is amazing.
Awesome.
And this is back when like the portable CD players were a thing.
Portable CD players.
Portable CD
That's
player
amazing.
children.
The original
Portable.
mixtapes?
Yes, the original. And you gotta like wipe the back of the CD off with the alcohol wipe and put it in. And you gotta hold the CD player tight so it don't skip while you walking down the street.
It'll mess you up.
I'm telling you, man, that it was something about Ty Tribbett that just really, really did it for me. Even Fred Hammond, he had this Warehouse series where he was doing songs in the warehouse. Oh my goodness. It was just something so unique about the sound and fun. And my brother is also a musician, so like me and him would like bang on anything in the house to those
sweet.
records. And
That's awesome.
Yeah, it set us off real good.
Love it. How about you, Daniel?
So mine was a mix of secular and like Christian stuff. So I remember my dad bringing home a WoW CD. Like WoW, that's
Like
what.
WoW Worship?
Yeah, WoW
Gospel,
Worship.
yeah.
And on this one there was Grits. They're a Christian hip rap duo, and then Relient K was on that CD as well. So I remember my brother and I just like watching that DVD on loop for like hours. And like as I grew older, I just started listening to like Usher, and I started listening to like 50 Cent, and listening to bands like Coldplay, and kind of all of that stuff kind of just started to just shape and kind of mold me as a writer and as an artist and just like musician. It's just like, oh, okay, cool. Like, how does all of this coexist? Because a lot of it, even Explosions in the Sky, like, was like just gave me like a love for instrumental music that also would just like was just super interwoven and like had movements in it. But with like worship, it was Matt Redman was a very big staple in our family, and like a favorite of mine is like Heart of Worship, because that centered me as a follower of Christ, and was like, hey, in all of the things that you're doing, whether you're on stage or not, this is where this is what your posture is supposed to be. And so kind of just all of the above would be the answer that I would give.
That's great.
So good.
So there's more worship music than ever, right? There's thousands of playlists on Spotify. There's more artists because there's more tools in people's bedrooms, and stuff's just coming out of everywhere, right? But I still think that I would be curious to know, one, do you feel like there's still a need for new music? And if yes, what does that music need to be or say from the church? So do we need any more music, or do we have enough? And if so, what does it need to be like?
We definitely need more music, and we need more music coming out of the relationships, the diverse relationships that we have with people. I think that is so key for the progression of music and the progression of worship music. Like, and you see it in pop music. Like, there's so many influences. There's like country pop and funk pop and R&B pop and like just all these different, coming together of different genres and sounds. And it's just a testament to different experiences, and I'm sure relationships with folks. And just like here, like there's so many great relationships here that we're making. And I think more music needs to sound like that, those relationships.
Love it.
Yeah, I love what you said about the music sounding like relationships. And it makes me think about the difference between being inclusive, with music, and where people's backgrounds all coming into one thing versus like just diverse, like you can have spaces where there are people who sing music, but just there's a difference between people bringing themselves and it being based off of relationship, and everybody's different viewpoints and backgrounds and coming together to make music together.
So are you differentiating diversity and inclusion?
I think so. I think there's you can have a diverse setting where there are different types of people kind of doing their own thing versus being inclusive where everybody is bringing themselves into a thing that is together.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's more of what the body of Christ needs. They need more inclusive. They need more different sounds but they're all coming together for one thing.
So it sounds like you're saying inclusion in the creation.
Yes, in the creation.
As opposed to just the execution.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Man,
That's
I would agree
strong.
with that.
Yeah.
Like that's such a key point because I think there's something to be said for honoring a person bringing their full authentic self in the process of that creation.
Yes, yes.
And in the like seeing that thing through to where you get to really you get the most out of what you're creating. I think there are moments where like I'll hear someone attempting a thing of like, oh man, like you were close, but like had you collaborated with someone that like that's their upbringing, that's their livelihood, it hits different. It just like there's something different about it that just like
absolutely
translates more. And I would say that's what we need more of in worship and in general. It's just like, like bring your full self. Let's also fight to preserve that full authentic voice in the final creation of that so that it reaches more people because the people hearing it and the people that it's ministering to, they're going to know when it's off. Like, I think that's one thing that I've learned is like people know when something's missing and because that's what they've grown up with, right? Like I can tell when like something's just like, I'm like, man, like that was close, but like, I don't know. Like it's just it's a intuition thing. So I think to honor people and the people that we minister to, like that needs to be something that is also factored in as we continue to make more worship.
That's
music.
great.
Yes.
That's great. Okay, y'all. This is the speed round. You don't have to qualify your answer. You can just give me just straight answer. Bass drops in worship. Go, Eric.
Absolutely.
Sade?
Yes.
Hell yes.
Great. Saxophone solos in worship.
It's a no for me, dog.
Nah.
If it's during communion, yes.
For special music. Great. Okay. Where do you think the Big C Church is getting it right in worship?
In creating songs that speak the language of us people today.
Oh, that's good.
That's solid. Yeah. Where would you like to see the church grow in terms of not diversity, but
Okay.
inclusivity?
The sounds of different groups, people, not just black and white, but Latino, world sounds,
Yeah.
bringing them all into the church. Inclusivity.
Beautiful.
I think in spaces of decision makers, I think that's a big one where the Big C Church could grow in, having more more inclusive voices of different representations.
Yes.
I think that will take us leaps and bounds.
So not just diversity on the stage and in the Easter production,
Yes.
but at the decision-making table.
Yes.
Precisely.
How is our church going to express worship
Absolutely.
corporately?
Yes.
Seat at the table.
Yep.
A seat at the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good start, and it has to be done with grace.
Yes.
Yep.
Because, there's so many facets to even being at the table as a black person
Yeah.
that, if I'm not in the right headspace, I might not have something to offer because I'm worried about if I'm, if my voice matters at all. And so
Absolutely.
just having grace that, I'm going to bring myself eventually.
Yeah. That's
That's it.
I'll tell you one. This is getting real. So one interaction that you and I had that was really formative for me, as I oversee what Crossroads does in terms of music and worship. You had in one of our staff worship times, you had introduced "Lord, You Are Good," which is sort of like a classic. Like I remember that song,
Oh, yeah.
and I remember Israel was like the first gospel music that I could play. And I was like, why don't you play gospel music, Robbie? Because I can't, right? I know 4.5 chords, and I have a capo. You know, that's sort of my life. So,
But you can play Israel.
but I could play that. You know, and I was like, oh, cool. So we re-recorded that song, and I thought we just knocked it out of the park. You know, and you came to me and you were like, hey, about that arrangement, I feel like the soul left the song. And it was that, as a leader, and you as a leader coming to me and just being very transparent and saying, this song is really important to me and my heritage and my background. And when you redid it, it felt like it got whitewashed a little bit. Man, that sort of relationship changes our church from the inside out. So I just want to thank you, and I want to thank all of you for being so strong and so vulnerable and wanting the best for our community and for making us better. It's so good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you. I think it's going to take that kind of heart, that kind of willingness to stop and
Yeah.
listen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to care for, the opinions and concerns that are being brought. And I felt like you did that well. And we're going to need that all around.
All around.
We're all going to need a dose of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That grace piece.
Yeah, that's a good word. Y'all, I'm really grateful for your transparency and your vulnerability and sharing some of your story with us. And I'm also thankful for the voice that you have here at Crossroads. Crossroads is better because you're here. And I'm excited about the relationships growing deeper. I'm excited for our community to be making out of those relationships. Eric, I think you said that so well. So thanks for taking time off and being here and sharing with us. It's really good.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. This was great.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Great.